Pellet gun is a lethal weapon. At close range, pellet gun can kill a person.
Non-lethal, but at what distance?
मैं राहुल गांधी से पूछना चाहता हूँ, ये पैलेट गन तो आपने ही कश्मीर में शुरू किया 2010 और 2016 में लगभग 400 कश्मीरियों को पैलेट गन के जरिए मार दिया.
And suddenly, the weapon has a history.
किस लिए, किस वजह से प्रोटेस्टर्स बच्चे के ऊपर आपने पैलेट गन्स, लाठी और इंजरीज की?
Students or a crowd out of control?
दिल्ली पुलिस के इसके अंदर है. वो लाठियां जिस पे कील लगी हुई थी, उसका इस्तेमाल हुआ, पैलेट गन का इस्तेमाल हुआ.
But was it Delhi police or RAF?
The Home Minister authorized. He put pellets into the blood of our students.
Now, the blame reaches the top.
राहुल गांधी जी, आप नेता प्रतिपक्ष हैं, गंभीरता से बात बोलना चाहिए.
Injuries need answers, but accusations need proof.
इसको कहते हैं पैलेट गन. इसको कहते हैं पैलेट गन. इनकी आंख डैमेज हो गई है.
The protest is over. The students have left Jantar Mantar, the education minister has resigned, parliament has moved on to the next fight. But one thing has not left that protest site. The pellets. Because the Supreme Court is now asking for something very specific. Not a speech, not a slogan, not a press conference, but a logbook. The RAF ammunition log. Who was issued what was fired, how many rounds, under whose command, and why did a student protest become a pellet gun case? That is the story. Not just whether pellets were fired, but whether a weapon, usually defended as exceptional, entered a protest space where thousands of young people had come over for an exam leak. And the real question is not as simple as people want it to be. Was this excessive force on students, or did the protest turn into something the public has not fully understood yet? Was this crowd control or punishment? Was this a breakdown of discipline or the result of rules that are still too vague for real-world chaos? Hold on to this, because the CJP protest may have ended, but the ammunition log has just begun speaking.
Pellet gun can blind a person.
Now, the easiest version of this debate is emotional. One side says students were hit, ban pellet guns. The other side says protests can turn violent, don't tie the hands of security forces. Both sound complete, but both are incomplete. Because the Supreme Court did something more interesting. It did not simply say ban it. It asked the petitioners to focus on protocol. Rules, graded response, exceptional use, that matters because the court noted that police rules may allow pellet guns in exceptional circumstances. It also said that if the challenge is to the rule itself, then the petition must show why the rule is arbitrary. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable because protesters have rights. The right to assemble, the right to dissent, the right to not be met with disproportionate force. But security forces also have rights. The right to not be overpowered, the right to protect themselves, the right to respond when a crowd turns violent. A protest on paper and a protest on the ground are not usually the same thing. On paper, there are warnings, announcements, barricades, escalation ladders, but on the ground, barricades shake, crowds surge, stones may fly, police lines panic, officers make decisions in seconds. So no, this cannot be reduced to a poster. But that is exactly why the record matters, because the more chaotic the situation becomes, the more important the chain of command also becomes.
प्रोटेस्टर्स बच्चे के ऊपर आपने पैलेट गन्स.
And this is the part many people are missing. Everyone keeps saying Delhi police fired pellets, but reporting on the official records point to the RAF, the Rapid Action Force deployed alongside the Delhi police. Now, the RAF is not ordinary local police. It is the CRPF's specialized anti-riot wing. Its equipment includes pellet guns and shock batons. And according to reporting on the general diary entry at Parliament Street Police Station, RAF personnel fired 2 rounds from an anti-riot gun loaded with plastic pellets, allegedly on the directions of a DCP rank officer. The same entry also recorded tear gas grenades, and multiple other shells used during the crackdown. So, now the question changes. When Delhi police and RAF stand together at the same barricade, who owns the decision? The force carrying the weapon, the officer giving the order, the command structure above him, or the system that allowed that weapon to be deployed there in the very first place? This is why the logbook matters, because politics asks, who do we blame? A logbook asks, what happened? And sometimes the most dangerous document in a democracy is not a manifesto. It is an entry made after force was used. Now, briefly, let us just understand why pellet guns are different. A bullet is usually aimed. One line, one target, one direction. A pellet cartridge does something very different. It does something else. It spreads. That is the entire controversy. Because even if the person firing intends to hit below the waist, the weapon does not behave like one clean line. It scatters. It can hit the person in front, the person behind, the person running away, the person filming, the person who was never the intended target. That is why the phrase non-lethal is doing a lot of work here. Non-lethal does not mean harmless. It means not designed to kill, but a weapon can fail to kill you and still change the rest of your life. If pellets hit muscle, maybe the wound heals. If they hit the eye, nerve, blood vessel, bone, joint, face, neck, chest, or spine, the story changes. Medical experts have warned that pellet injuries can cause irreversible damage, including blindness, nerve damage, chronic pain, and psychological trauma depending on distance, velocity, and the body part that was hit. Now, let us have a brief look at what the rules say. Crowd control is supposed to move in stages: persuasion, negotiation, warnings, minimal force, proportionality, medical aid, stop force once violence stops. That is the clean world of SOPs. And that brings us to the core fault line. If pellet guns are for exceptional cases, what proves the case at Jantar Mantar on 28th July was exceptional? Not emotionally, not politically, but documentarily. What warnings were given, what threat was recorded, what alternatives failed, who authorized escalation, at what point was it fired, was it plastic, rubber or metal, was medical aid immediate, was force stopped when the crowd moved back? These are very boring questions until someone loses their vision. Then they become the only question that matters. There is also a very important reason why pellet guns carry a different memory in India. They entered the national imagination through Kashmir, and Kashmir was always framed by the state as exceptional. But Delhi is different. Jantar Mantar is not a remote conflict zone. It is the protest capital of India. So if a weapon associated with exceptional unrest appears in the national capital during a student protest, the question is no longer only legal. It becomes civic. Are exceptional weapons now entering ordinary protest policing, or was July 20 genuinely one of those exceptional moments? That is the question the slogans cannot answer. And then, of course, politics arrived. Rahul Gandhi has picked this up aggressively. He has blamed Amit Shah over the police actions, including alleged pellet firing on students. The BJP has pushed back, demanding proof and accusing him of making unsubstantiated claims. Reports say parts of his remarks were disallowed in the Lok Sabha. So now, Parliament has its fight. Congress sees an opening, the government sees an accusation, the protesters see injuries, the police see a law and order situation, and the court sees a protocol question. But this is bigger than Rahul Gandhi, bigger than Amit Shah, bigger than BJP, bigger than Congress, because whichever party is in power, the state will still have to use force from time to time, and citizens will still need protection from excessive force. That is the uncomfortable part. Everyone wants the answer to punish their opponent, but the real answer may need to restrain the state itself. Any state, run by anyone. So this is not a simple story of one protest. The CJP protest already changed politics. It forced a resignation, it created a new student leadership, it dragged the exam leak issue into parliament. But the pellet gun question may become its most lasting consequence because now India has to answer something it has avoided for too long. When does crowd control become punishment? When does less lethal become life-altering? When does an exceptional weapon become normal? And when police and paramilitary forces stand together at the same barricade, who controls and who carries the accountability? The protest ended, the students left, the slogans faded. But somewhere in an official record, there is a line. A weapon issued, a round fired, an order given, a body injured, and maybe an exception created. That is why the Supreme Court did not ask for a slogan. It asked for the logbook. Because in a democracy, force is not only judged by what the state says, it is judged by what the state records say. And if exceptional force is ever allowed, then exceptional accountability cannot be optional. You were watching Fault Lines. I am Abhijit.